Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a really fascinating translated personal account today. It's from a bookstore owner based in Rajahmundry.
Right, which is a city in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh.
Exactly. And this story, it starts back in 1988. Our mission for this deep dive is to use this highly localized, real-world case study to figure out why simply consuming positive thinking content isn't actually enough to cure modern stress.
Yeah, and how true wellness actually requires a highly personalized physical practice.
Because usually when we talk about fixing a problem, like stress or burnout, there's this underlying assumption that more information is always the solution. Like if you're lost in the woods, a map will save you.
Right, if you're drowning, you just need someone to throw you a life preserver. You lack something, you acquire the tool to fix it, and boom, the problem goes away.
Yep.
I mean, that's basically the baseline logic of the entire modern wellness industry.
It is. But then you look at that industry, specifically the self-help world, and you see something totally counterintuitive. You see people who are absolutely surrounded by life preservers.
Yep.
They have stacks of them, mountains of them in the form of books and podcasts and apps, and yet they're still drowning.
It's true. The people consuming the most advice are very often like the exact ones experiencing the least amount of behavioral change.
Exactly. And that is the irony at the center of this bookseller's story. He's selling the most popular, highly sought-after self-help books in the world, and he slowly realizes that those exact books are fundamentally failing his most dedicated customers.
Which is such an amazing realization for a guy selling books to have.
Right. To understand how that happens, we have to travel back to 1988 Rajahmundry. We're in a completely pre-digital world. I mean, there are no smartphones. The internet isn't a thing.
Even television hasn't entirely dominated the culture yet.
Yeah, exactly. Which means if you're an educated person in this community looking for a pastime or looking for answers to life's problems, your options are pretty limited.
Reading and visiting local libraries were really the primary ways people engaged with new ideas back then.
So our author establishes this bookshop. He mentions it has a very small entrance, but it sits in this highly advantageous central location in the city. And he isn't just a cashier ringing up purchases.
Oh, he's a true curator.
Yeah. He orders good books from publishers, sits down, reads them himself, and only then puts them on the shelf to sell.
And that curation aspect is so vital to understand the cultural climate of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because in an era without search engines or, crowdsourced reviews telling us what's worth our time, the local bookseller held a position of immense intellectual trust.
Right.
He was essentially the gatekeeper of knowledge for the community. If he read a book and said it was valuable, people really took his word for it.
So he was basically acting like a modern-day TikTok algorithm or like a highly curated Spotify playlist. But instead of code, he's a human recommendation engine for his city.
A human algorithm, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And a human algorithm is vastly more powerful because of the feedback loop.
Oh, how so?
Well, a digital algorithm recommends something, you click it, and it learns your preference based on a cold data point. But this bookseller was having actual sustained conversation.
Wow, right.
People would walk in, ask what he was reading, ask his opinion, and then report back on what they thought. I mean, it was a deeply relational exchange of ideas.
That makes total sense. And among all the books he stocked, the ones flying off his shelves the fastest, the ones dominating the general category, were positive thinking books. Mm-hmm. These weren't typically available in the local library, so if you wanted them, you had to come to his shop. The earliest one he remembers selling was the absolute classic, Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
A huge title.
Yeah, massive. And he notes these were mostly in English at first until Telugu authors started emerging. He specifically points to Yandamuri Virendranath, who wrote a massively popular book called Vijayaniki Idu Metlu, which translates to 5 Steps to Success.
So he's importing these foundational texts of modern self-help into this local community. And because he's reading them all first, he knows exactly what promises these books are making.
Right. They promise to alleviate anxiety.
Exactly. Guarantee success and give readers a foolproof blueprint for a happy life.
And this brings us to the trap. As he's curating these books and chatting with his customers, he starts paying close attention to who is actually buying them. And he notices a very specific demographic: marketing professionals.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. These are people working in high-pressure, high-stress jobs, and they aren't just buying one book to solve their problems. He spots a serious compulsion. These specific customers would buy every single book that came out in the positive thinking category.
Wow. Every single one. Because he's friendly with them, he gets to know them over time.
Hmm?
And he makes this really piercing observation.
What's that?
No matter how many positive thinking books these marketers read, they absolutely cannot conquer their mental stress. I mean, the books are completely useless at doing the one thing they explicitly claim to do.
But wait, Dale Carnegie's books are specifically designed to give actionable advice. I mean, how to stop worrying and start living isn't just abstract philosophy. It has actual steps.
Right.
It literally tells you what to do. So why wouldn't reading a step-by-step guide about stopping worrying actually make them stop worrying?
That gets right to the heart of the psychological trap of passive consumption. We really have to look at how the brain processes information versus how the body processes stress.
Okay, tell me more.
When you read a book with actionable steps, your intellect is engaged. You understand the concepts. You might even feel a surge of motivation, right?
Yeah, that spark of like, oh, I'm going to change my life today.
Exactly. And that surge of dopamine tricks your brain into feeling a false sense of accomplishment.
So just by reading the chapter and understanding the logic, your brain feels like you've already done the work.
Yes. It feels like forward momentum, but it's entirely passive. The problem with high stress, especially the chronic kind experienced by marketing professionals constantly under pressure, is that it doesn't just live in the intellect.
Right, it's physical.
It lives in the nervous system. It physically manifests in your behavioral patterns. Shallow breathing, chronic muscle tension. You cannot read your way out of a dysregulated nervous system.
Oh.
So the positive thinking books address the cognitive mind, but completely ignored the physiological reality of stress.
So they're coming in week after week, buying the next book, getting that quick dopamine hit of feeling like they found the secret, and then they're just going right back to their high-stress jobs with a nervous system that is still completely fried.
They were essentially self-medicating with information.
That is such a fascinating way to put it, and the bookseller realizes this. He sees the intellectual approach is failing his customers. And because reading isn't working, he decides to recommend a physical, active intervention.
Yoga.
Yes. He tells these stressed-out marketers to practice yoga, which, sounds totally normal to us today. There's a yoga studio in almost every strip mall.
Oh, everywhere, yeah.
But we have to contextualize this setting. In the late 1980s in this part of India, yoga teachers were actually incredibly rare.
Right.
And the ones who did exist were not exactly equipped to deal with a burnt-out marketing executive.
Well, the historical evolution of yoga is a key piece of the puzzle here. The source notes, the few existing teachers at the time were strictly traditional. Their entire focus was on Jivan Mukti, which translates to spiritual liberation or enlightenment. I mean, they were ascetics.
They were trying to transcend the physical world entirely, not, figured out how to hit a corporate sales quota by Friday without having a panic attack.
Exactly. There's a massive friction there. These traditional teachers had zero understanding of modern societal stress. They lacked an English education, and they had no background in psychology or the kind of modern mental health literature the bookseller was dealing with every day.
Right.
They taught with a kind of rigid purity that just refused to adapt to the physiological needs of the modern urban worker.
And the bookseller himself sits perfectly at the crossroads of these two worlds. I mean, he isn't just a guy who read a pamphlet on stretching. He was initiated into the Nath tradition, which is a very ancient, rigorous yogic lineage.
It is.
The text actually mentions he had attained dharana siddhi.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
Dharana siddhi refers to a profound, advanced state of deep concentration. It's the ability to hold the mind entirely steady on a single point.
Oh, wow.
And he cultivated this through intense personal practice in the early mornings.
So he's literally the only person in town who intimately understands the modern psychological problem from reading the Western self-help books, and also possesses the ancient physical tool to fix it through his Eastern spiritual discipline.
And that puts a tremendous burden of responsibility on him.
I bet.
He sees the traditional ascetic teachers failing because they don't understand the psychology of the stressed modern worker. And he sees the self-help books failing because they don't address the physical reality of a dysregulated nervous system.
Right.
So he realizes he has to be the one to bridge that gap.
And feeling this sense of duty, which he describes as guru dakshina, an offering or a repayment of debt to his own guru, he steps up. He begins teaching his interested customers. But he only does it for 1 hour on Sundays.
Right. He kept it contained.
Yeah, and he strongly criticizes the modern trend of mass yoga classes, where an instructor just gathers a huge crowd in a room and demonstrates poses at the front.
His critique of mass yoga is incredibly sharp. The mass model fundamentally ignores the individual. It assumes that every single body and mind in a room of 50 people needs the exact same physical intervention at the exact same time. The bookseller knew from talking to his customers that people's stresses, though common in origin, are highly individualized in how they physically manifest.
It's the difference between buying a mass-produced one-size-fits-all suit off the rack at a department store versus going to a master tailor who measures every single inch of you.
That's a perfect analogy.
Not just your physical measurements, but how you walk, what kind of chairs you sit in, what the climate is like, where you live.
And his tailoring process was astonishingly thorough. The source tells us he bypassed the mass class model entirely. He taught individuals or very small groups.
Right.
He customized the practice based completely on their specific physical and mental health. He even went so far as to analyze their horoscopes, their jatakam, before giving them guidance.
Wait, really? Analyzing horoscopes for stress management?
Yeah.
Because to a modern listener, that sounds like it crosses the line from wellness into, like, magic. How does that actually work as a practical tool for someone burnt out from a marketing job?
Well, we have to look at how jatakam functions within that specific cultural context. It wasn't about predicting the future in a magical sense. It was a deeply personalized diagnostic tool.
Oh, I see.
Analyzing a person's jatakam was a framework for understanding their inherent tendencies, their potential physiological vulnerabilities, and the timeline of their life stressors. It forced a comprehensive lifestyle audit.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're getting a physical assessment, a psychological assessment based on the books you've been venting to him about, and this astrological assessment that maps out your broader life patterns. He's looking at you as a complete, complex system.
Think about the physiological impact that level of attention has on a person experiencing severe chronic stress. Before they even strike a single yoga pose, they are being truly seen.
Wow, yeah.
They are sitting with someone who's taking the time to thoroughly understand their unique constitution. In a corporate world that treats them as a replaceable cog and machine, this bookseller treats them as an intricate, singular individual.
That's powerful.
That level of personalized care, the feeling of being profoundly understood, actually triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. It signals to the body that it is safe, which is the first step in regulating stress.
The act of someone paying that much attention to your specific reality is a massive relief in itself. So what happens to the shop? I mean, this all started with him trying to sell positive thinking books. We see this narrative arc conclude with a total transformation of both the customers and the bookseller himself.
The behavioral outcomes are exactly what you'd hope for. Because of this intensely personalized care, his customers formed long-term, deep relationships with him. Remember, there's no internet or mobile phones.
Right.
The bookshop remained their physical meeting hub. It became the anchor of their community.
And their buying habits completely flipped. They stopped buying the positive thinking books.
Entirely.
The compulsive self-help buying completely ceased. Instead, they switched to buying books on yoga, health, and naturopathy. They moved from looking for quick intellectual fixes to investing in long-term, holistic physical well-being.
Which proves his initial observation. Once they started actually doing the customized physical work to regulate their nervous systems, they no longer needed the endless dopamine loop of passive reading. They had finally broken the cycle of self-medicating with information.
The author reflects on his own life with a lot of humility here. He says his life consisted solely of his shop, his home, and his personal yoga practice. That's it.
Yeah.
Yet, through that simple, dedicated routine, he became an indirect guru. He became this beloved librarian and guide, ultimately connecting with thousands of people in Rajahmundry over the years.
It's a powerful statement about the nature of influence. We live in an era where the assumption is that to have real impact, you need a massive digital platform. You need millions of followers, or you need to scale your message to reach the entire globe.
You need to be the mass yoga class just on the internet.
Precisely. But this story proves that profound, lasting influence doesn't require a global platform at all. It requires deep, sustained, and personalized attention to the people right in front of you.
Right.
He didn't franchise his method. He didn't write his own positive thinking bestseller to compete with Dale Carnegie. He just stayed in his small shop, and he paid meticulous attention to the human beings walking through his door.
He transformed thousands of lives not by broadcasting a one-size-fits-all message, but by analyzing their specific needs down to their jatakam and giving them exactly the practice they needed. It's an incredible testament to the power of a localized physical community space.
It really is.
The third place outside of work and home where you're treated as a whole person.
And it serves as a sharp critique of how we approach wellness today. We have endless apps, endless generalized advice, and endless mass classes. But what we're often starving for is exactly what the bookseller provided.
Which is?
Someone to help us navigate all that noise and tell us what we, individually, actually need to do with our bodies to process our stress.
So let's bring this deep dive back to you listening right now. We've taken this journey from a small bookshop in 1988, Rajahmundry, watching a man realize that selling Dale Carnegie wasn't enough, to understanding the mechanics of why managing modern stress requires active, deeply customized physical practice.
The core lesson is the vital transition from passive intellectual consumption to active, tailored physical application.
The question you have to ask yourself is, what do your own habits look like? Are you trapped in that same cycle those stressed marketing professionals were in?
It's so easy to fall into.
Are you just buying the positive thinking books, listening to the advice, understanding it intellectually, but stopping there? Or are you actually doing the personalized physical work required to regulate your own nervous system?
Because it's incredibly easy to confuse knowing what to do with actually doing the work.
Yeah. Which leaves us with one final thought to mull over. In our modern digital world, information is infinitely accessible. You can download 1,000 books on happiness right now in 3 seconds. Yet collectively, we're more stressed, more anxious, and more burnt out than ever before.
Yeah.
We're surrounded by those life preservers, and we're still sinking. Perhaps the ultimate luxury of the future isn't having access to more data.
Okay.
It isn't a membership to a bigger mass wellness class or downloading the newest app.
Right.
The ultimate luxury might just be finding that rare modern equivalent of the Rajahmundry bookseller, someone who cuts through the noise, looks at your specific life, and knows exactly what you need to practice, not just what you need to read.